Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Welcome back to another IFSCA live. Just sound check. Can you hear me okay? If you have any issues with the sound, please let me know. Hopefully, it'll be better than last time. As usual, what we do here is we have a conversation. I usually bring a topic that I talk about in the beginning, and then we go into a conversation. So feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat. Great, everybody's hearing me. Okay, that's great news. So the topic I chose to talk about today is the three primary approaches for applying IFS. It's a really basic topic, but I think it's something that a lot of people don't quite get. And so in IFS, we have three basic ways of applying IFS. We have going inside, turning inwards, and relating to parts inside. We call that insight. We have speaking directly. The therapist or practitioner or coach speaks directly to a part. We call that direct access. Direct access has two types. We have the implicit direct access, where me as the practitioner, I know that I'm speaking to a part in a client, but the client is not aware that it's a part that's blended with them that's speaking back to me. And we have the explicit, where I get permission and I say, hey, can I speak to that part of you? And the client says yes. And then I go and I speak directly. And then the third way that we can apply IFS is through externalizations, which is a very interesting and a very big topic and also very important. So a lot of people, they equate doing IFS with doing insight. And so when they meet a client that is not ready for insight, what happens is they have a part in them that judges them for not doing it correctly, not doing it well, or not doing IFS. And that's not true. That's not what it is. You're just not using insight with that client because it's not safe to do so. So I want to talk a little bit more about the three ways that we apply IFS so that you understand them. So insight is usually what's taught initially, because it's what's most novel. And also, once you learn how to do insight, then you can kind of translate the same interventions into direct access and externalizations, and they work. So insight is the client turning inwards and having an aspect of themselves that relates to their parts. Ideally, it's their self energy that's relating to the parts, but a lot of times it could also be a part relating to other parts. And that's something that we have to assess. So for example, when a client is blended with the self-like part, and they go inside and they say, oh, this part of me is bringing this information and then saying that, and they say it this way, etc. They could be blended with the self-like part, and they are still getting information somehow. It doesn't mean that they're not doing insights. It just means that they're doing insights, but through the mediation of another part. Is it better to do it through self-energy? Sure, right? But you don't get to have all clients do it from the get-go in that way, that they just have access to self-energy and they can go inside that way. Insight is something that can be difficult for some clients to do. It can be difficult because it doesn't feel safe. to do so, because when they turn inwards, they it could be that just the fact of turning inwards becomes an invitation for their exiles to come forward. Because think about it, exiles have been pushed away, but they want to be witnessed. They want to be heard and seen and felt and understood. And so when we start to shine light on them, even it's just a little bit, just this fact of turning inwards, they come out. As they come and start communicating with us in whatever way they can communicate, in a lot of ways it's showing showing images, feelings, sensations, emotions, etc. A lot of times it's overwhelming for the system, for other parts in the system to get that much information. And so it can be scary for a client to turn inwards because they don't quite understand what's happening. All they know is when they go inside, something doesn't feel good. They cannot yet distinguish that what's happening is a part is communicating with you. That's great, right? But they don't have enough self energy that they can go, oh, hey, part, I'm really getting this. I'm feeling this anxious feeling like something really bad's going to happen that you're sending me. And I feel it throughout my whole body. And it feels like in any moment, something really horrible is going to happen and I'm going to die. So if they have that much unblending and they can do that, great. Then they can do insight. But a lot of times they can't. And so if the client cannot do insight, doesn't have enough self energy, or is not unblended enough from their parts, then one thing that we can do is use direct access. Direct access is easier on the client because when you do insight, you need to have self relating to part, and this back and forth can be hard to do because a lot of the information that comes from parts is disorienting to other parts. As I just said, like if you get a lot of feelings in your body, a part of you is going to be like, ooh, that's bad, let's stop that. Or I'm just feeling this weird thing in my body, doesn't make any sense. Things have to make sense. Things have to make sense. Let's stop this. That doesn't make sense. So doing this thing of like, here I am, my self energy, and I'm talking to my parts. This is something that requires a level of self energy, a level of unblending, that and it's also a level of complexity, right? Because I have to hold that differentiation. I have to hold that distinction of here's me, my self energy, and here are my parts. So when we say, can I just speak to that part of you directly, we're actually making things easier for the client. They're able to blend with a part of them, let it speak through their mouth, and it just becomes simpler. They don't have to hold multiple perspectives. They don't have to feel towards a part of them. They can just be the part and kind of like role play. And sometimes that's also how we invite the client to go into doing it for the first time. We say, hey, can you just role play that part of you? If it was going to say something, what would it say? Right. And we can just do it in that way to make it low risk, right? Do it in a hypothetical so that it's not like, oh, if I say the wrong thing, do I even know if the part is communicating with me? This feels weird, feels strange, whatever it is, right? So we can make it easier to do it that way. But if you have experience as a client, you will notice that speaking from a part like that, just being blended with the part, although you know in explicit direct access, you know that you blend it with the part, but speaking from a part in that way is simpler. It's easier, and so information comes more readily. And so that can be preferable in some situations. So for example, working with blocking parts, sometimes, hey, can I talk to that part of you? Hey, blocking part, hi, can you tell me more about yourself? Or, what made you just jump in right now? What are you afraid is going to happen if you don't do this? So asking those questions can be really helpful. And so that's direct access. But sometimes even this is too much, the explicit direct access. So we have to go to implicit direct access, right? So here is the client. Client is talking about like how angry they are. And I try to ask the client, hey, are you noticing this is a part of you that's angry? No, it's me. I'm angry. I'm pissed. I can't believe that they did this to me. So if you have indications that the client cannot, or for some reason parts in the client don't want to unblend enough to see something as a part, you can just let the part speak and you can just have a conversation. You're going to have the IFS model in the back of your head, and you're going to be asking questions that you would ask through Insight, but you're going to be asking them in this conversation as if you were doing talk therapy, right? So you might say, okay, so you're angry. Have you, is this normal for you? Do you always get angry in this way? Or is it the first time that you're feeling angry in this way? Oh, no, I always get angry like this. Oh, okay, so this is familiar to you. What are some earlier memories that you have of being angry this way? And what other moments in your life were you angry, right? And then we can go into history. We can ask, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't get angry? Oh, then they would really stick it to me. Oh, okay. So you're concerned that if you don't get angry, then people really will stick it to you. Okay. That makes sense to me. And you don't want people to do that to you. Have people done that to you in the past? Right? So that this conversation is, I know I'm talking to a part, and and as I ask these questions, we get to know the part. I get to know the part better. And maybe at some point, I might hear something from the client that sounds like other parts are coming in, and I might say, okay, so there's the side of you that's angry, and then there's this other perspective that becomes available that says, maybe the way that I'm reacting is too much, right? So one side of you says, of course I have all the right to be angry. Another side says, maybe I'm being too intense about it. Does that make sense? Right. And so we are starting to transition back into naming parts, and maybe the possibility of going back into Insight. Now, sometimes going back into Insight is not available, and even doing explicit direct access is not okay. And implicit direct access is really all we have access to. Then externalization can come in. That can be a very helpful way of working. And so externalization is basically doing on the outside what happens inside. It's creating images or representations of the inside, outside, and this makes things a lot easier, right? So if you have to turn inwards and notice shame, very easily you're going to feel the shame as you do that. But if you get a piece of paper and you draw the part of you that holds shame, and you're drawing this little boy that's just hiding in the corner, there is a level of separation that you gain from doing that, from externalizing it that way. And just looking at that boy in the corner, oh, there's some compassion that comes for that boy. I can look at him and feel compassion for him. So lots of folks, they have a hard time having compassion towards their parts internally, but once we externalize their parts, then it's almost as if they were looking at someone else. And for a lot of folks, it's easy to have compassion for others and not so easy to have compassion for yourself, right? So the moment that we externalize, we are making it easier for them to be compassionate towards themselves. It also brings more clarity, right? Because inside it's all jumbled up, but once you put it on the piece of paper, and maybe you even start drawing the connection between parts, or how one part takes you to another part and takes you to another part, all of this can be very helpful. And there are multiple ways of externalizing parts. I've done, for example, in sessions that I was in person with clients, I've done just like, let's go around the room finding objects that can represent your parts, and let's put them, let's find a place to represent yourself, and let's place them here, right? And I've done this in rooms where I had objects. I've done this outside when we were like hiking and in parks and beaches and different places. And it's great because as the client gets an object to represent the part, they can hold the object, and I can say, okay, so just, as you hold this object, speak from this part a little bit. What does he want to say? Right? And then the part says something, then I might ask, okay, where do you want to put that in on the board, or where we are putting your part? So it goes here in front of this one because it's protecting that one, right? And then as the client is talking about this part, they say something else that sounds like another part, and I might say, okay, so this thing that you just said, is that coming from one of these parts that's on the board, or is it coming from another part? Oh, it's another one. Okay, so let's go and find an object to represent that one. And as we do that, we're doing like a parts mapping, which is a type of externalization, and we are finding objects and putting them in connection with each other on the board. Other ways of externalizing is you can use your hands and you can let them speak like puppets. You can just have the client just choose objects in front of them, especially when you're like working with polarizations, and okay, hold this one and speak for this one, hold this one, speak for this one. You can have you can invite them to go out and buy something, or create something if they're artistic that represents a part of them, and so they can have like objects that are meaningful to them that will represent a part, and then they can have they can do stuff relating to that. For example, if it's a little baby part and they find something to represent the little baby part, they might have the impulse to hold it. And just this like holding a part of you, just having the physicality, it can be very, very meaningful. We can also sometimes use like cushions, and and they just hold that. All types of objects can be helpful. Sometimes if it's a protector part and it's like it's supposed to protect you somehow and to keep you small or safe, you could use a blanket and tie it around and make it really tight, and you can try it on and feel what that's like to have that part with you, and then you can get a deeper sense of how it helps you, what the good intention is, what the benefit is. You can invite clients to write it down as we go into the session, and they name a new part. They say, okay, put that part on the piece of paper. How does that part want to be called? Or is there an image or a drawing that can represent the part? I have had clients that are artistic, and they go and they draw, or they paint, or they create a sculpture or something that represents their parts. That's usually very, very meaningful, and then they can come back and talk to you. They can look at it and they can talk about it, and as they talk about it, a lot of information comes forward. Yeah, so those are just some of the ways that we can externalize them, but hopefully you see how helpful and useful this is. The last way that I have not mentioned yet to externalize is to actually role play with other people and do it psychodrama style. If you're working in person and you have a group of people, and then you just have different people represent your parts, And that can be wonderful, because then once you set it up, you can go and you can tap a part on the shoulder and take the place of that part. And then you can be that part for a little bit, and you can try it on, and then you can go and try to be the other part. You can look at the system from different angles and come closer or go further away from the system or from individual parts. You can check how, if you have any impulses towards any of those parts, if you want to hold them or hug them, or if you want to move away from them, and that can be very telling. A lot of information comes from doing that. So basically, the ways that we can externalize parts are infinite. And if you're not using externalizations yet, or not enough, then I suggest you to, at least with parts mapping, inviting your clients to do parts mapping can be very, very, very important. Okay, so those are the three primary approaches and ways that we apply IFS. I hope that was useful to you. And if you have any questions or comments, please post them in the chat, and we can have a little bit of a conversation now. I see in the chat that Michael said, hello, Gustavo. Reviewing a tape from the advanced weekend with you, I was, again, struck by a comment about healers in Brazil working in mental health settings to do work akin to releasing UVs. I want to hear more what you have learned about their training methods. Yeah, so Bob talks a lot about this. And those are the spiritists here in Brazil. So they have their own way of working. I believe that they have some books that have been translated. If you want to read more, I'll look into it though, and I'll let you know. Okay, so if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. Let me see if anyone sent any questions in the forms for us. Okay, so we don't have any new questions. So those of you that are watching, if you have questions or comments, please post them so that we can have a conversation. Otherwise, that will be it for today. Okay, so I guess Rachel Crowder says, it was useful. Yes, I haven't taken advanced trainings in IFS, but have training in other modalities and have intuitively adapted IFS for clients. For example, externalization is used in narrative therapy. Okay, great. Yeah. And IFS can go really well with other modalities. Great. So I'm glad that you've done that, Rachel. Okay, so I guess that's it for today. I hope to see you here again next time. Again, if you have questions, you can send them to my email. It's gustavo.alps@gmail.com. So you can send questions to my email there. You can use the contacts in ifsca.ca page. And you can also post them in the chat here when we go live. So thank you all for being here today, and I will see you next Monday. Bye-bye.